Welcome to Innovating with Scott Amyx. I'm your host, Scott, and today I'm joined by Dr. Howard Urnovitz, who is a co-founder and CEO of FBB Biomedical. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks, Scott.
All right. So you're a researcher in the field of microbiology and immunology and have 2 FDA approvals on tests for HIV and many patents as well. So tell us about kind of your career work and the research that you've been focusing on, and specifically as it relates to now COVID-19.
Thanks. My mom died of breast cancer about 50 years ago, and then other members of my family. And so I went to college with the concept of trying to figure out what I can do in the battle against cancer. And I found myself working in a laboratory working on RNA viruses and cancer. And so since that time, I have pursued all of my life's career trying to battle cancer. And so when the AIDS epidemic hit and I was in San Francisco, I immediately saw a way to build some rapid tests and also urine tests for HIV so that public health services could use it. And so now I'm turning my attention on just the role of RNA. And in a lecture I gave last year, I was forecasting that if we don't get busy starting to organize RNA, we're going to be in big trouble. I didn't know I only had 10 months before the COVID epidemic happened.
Now, what do you think that some of the work that you're referring to in terms of the work around RNA and the kind of pre-work that should have been in place already, why has it been somewhat active, but maybe not as active as the current stage that we're seeing today?
We hypothesized 30 years ago in the AIDS epidemic that this was a disease of interactive infections. A lot of us knew HIV had to be involved in the equation, but we always sensed that the other bacteria and other viruses were actually working in concert with HIV. Well, it was only a theory and a hypothesis, and so we didn't have any of the tools that were necessary for us to go about testing the hypothesis. Well, we have the tools now. And so a lot of the fact is that we needed to have faster sequencers, we needed the human genome map, we needed computers like that have the power that we have today. And so now with that and all of the tools of what's called bioinformatics, the way that we actually sort through all of this sequencing is really the key now. And that's what I was saying a year ago, is we really need to focus our energies with this new technology so we can combat chronic diseases. And so that's why I think RNA is really the most important molecule to monitor, because it's basically doing the work of what DNA is, the set of instructions you get from your mother and father. RNA is actually the workhorse. That's what we need to measure.
Mm-hmm. Which brings me to your current company, which is FBB Biomed. Tell us what exactly you guys are doing and the mission statement.
So, to our mind, that we're living in an exciting time. Insofar as that we're seeing that about 20-30% of people with cancer are responding when you try to strengthen their immune systems, not try to kill the cancer. So what we wanted to do at FBB Biomed was say, how do we make increase this efficiency from 20-30% to 100%? And while we're at it, why don't we just go after all chronic diseases? So that's why we funded it. Our mission statement is to make sure that people have fully functioning immune systems, because with a fully functioning immune system, you can pretty much keep most diseases at bay. So that was the mission, was to try and make sure that we know that doctors have the information that somebody's immune system may be crashing and how to fix it.
And that brings up the point at hand, which is the current COVID testing, really looking for whether you are infected or not. How is that different from the kind of COVID co-infection tests that you are looking to administer?
So this is a virus like we've never seen before, and I've been studying these for almost 50 years. And the problem is that because we don't know much about COVID-19, we have a good deal of knowledge on coronaviruses, the family it comes from, but this one's really quite different. And so what I'm concerned about is the early tests that have come out, and we need all the tests we can get out there to help us measure at any efficiency to see how bad is this pandemic. But the problem is the early tests are having a lot of false negatives. That is to say, people are saying you're fine, but you actually have the virus. A lot of this is because we don't understand how the virus, the dynamics and the complexity of this viral infection. We don't understand the comorbidity factors. We know if you have hypertension or diabetes, obesity, that you're at higher risk. But the fact of the matter is, we really have to look at the environment you're in. Some places are heavily polluted with nitrogen dioxide or have industrial pollutions, that people are having a chronic inflammation that when the virus comes in, it takes advantage of that damaged immune system. So what I'm suggesting then is these early tests, and even antibody tests, which says that you were exposed to the virus. We've shown in the AIDS epidemic that you could have antibodies in your urine and not in your blood. And in fact, that suggested to us that you had a natural immunity to the virus. So our proposal is simple. Measure everything. Take a blood draw, sequence everything in that drop of blood, and then use bioinformatics to rank what's the most important thing. So let's build the most complex test, and then we'll work backwards so that we can beat this epidemic.
So, so just to make sure I understand, in the bioinformatics, the analysis you're running, you're looking for culprits with the highest degree of confidence in terms of what's contributing to a particular illness that someone is having. And in many cases, it's not just some singular virus or bacteria, but it's a whole host of other things, including the environmental issues as well. Is that right?
That is correct. And there's a few more things to worry about. Is what we're measuring is the COVID-19, whatever other infections you may have, and it may just be a simple staphylococcus that lives on your skin that's been activated. And then there's one more thing. We're going to look in our pipeline on past infections. And why is that important? Well, we know about the examples, say, of shingles. Shingles will happen a decade after you get a certain herpes infection, and it will then manifest itself into a disease. So what we're looking for is, what is it unique to you? This is personalized diagnostics that says, yes, you have COVID-19, but then you have these other things going on, and then you have the immune system that's imbalanced. So by providing all of those complex millions of pieces of data down to a simple report that a doctor can look at actionable items, that's what the goal is for building the kinds of test design we have.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think media tends to want to paint a very large, sweeping view of if you're a certain age segment, you're more likely to be vulnerable from something like this versus a younger generation. What you're saying is really a hyper individual and personalized report that takes into account their entire historical as well as environmental and other factors.
That's correct. We're going to inventory everything. And we're going to use the successes. Look, the AIDS epidemic had many successes and many failures. One of the successes was that the brilliant doctors on the front line, before they knew there was an HIV virus, were treating the bacterial diseases that were presenting, pneumocystis, pneumonia, all these other things. We were doing that anyway because the immune system was completely blown apart and damaged in AIDS patients. So what we're doing now is this virus binds something called the ACE2 receptor. So it doesn't attack the immune system, it attacks the nervous system, the kidneys, many different cells. So we don't have those kinds of symptoms presenting to us, but those interactive infections will still be there. So if a doctor knows that there is a bacterial infection going on, we just don't see it, you can give antibiotics. Or if there's a past herpes infection that's been reactivated, you can give antivirals. So this kind of medical intelligence is available now because of the amazing machines that we have.
That's terrific. Can you start to help us kind of dissect and understand why are we seeing such varying variance in terms of the level of contagion and the types of symptoms people are having? Let's say those that are infected and suffering in Italy and Spain versus those that are in South Korea versus those that are in the U.S.
You know, I gave a lecture to the American German Business Club, and I was able to show to them a paper that just came out last week. If you look at the nitrogen dioxide pollution in Europe, it is heavily concentrated over northern Italy. You can overlay a map of the mortality of northern Italians and the type of pollution they have. But you don't see that kinds of pollution, say, in the Northeast Corridor in New York, New Jersey. Well, that's a different thing. Remember, in these areas, and the hardest hit is some of the minority groups, you can overlay the obesity and diabetes epidemic, which we know is chronic inflammation. So again, we believe that the data is suggesting, and that's why we want our test out there, that one of the comorbidity factors is, in fact, that your immune system is trying to tackle the pollution around you or the diets that you have. In New York City, there is access to fresh food is difficult, and you're forced to live on processed foods and too much sugar and all these other things. This will cause a chronic inflammation. So it is my hypothesis that COVID-19 is taking advantage of the people that are battling with chronic inflammation, and we need to measure chronic inflammation as we also measure how much virus load you have in your blood. This virus will reveal now the elephant in the room of what do we do to make sure that people are healthy, and what kinds of tests do we need to come out to show that you are healthy, and if you're not healthy, how do we fix that?
All right. My follow-up question is, are you seeing other tests in your category that's also looking for inflammation? And why is inflammation such a great indicator of what's happening?
There are other companies out there. I happen to know that there's companies in Europe that are coming out with a test they use for sepsis. They have all of these biomarkers that can measure the level of inflammation in your blood. So, everybody is looking at this with their own expertise. We think all these tests are important to get out there. And you know what? If our test isn't the winner, but there is a test that is, we all benefit from that. So all we're saying is, if we can measure everything, let's measure everything. But the key is, how do we make it simple for doctors? They don't want to pour through 150 pages of reports. They need actionable items. That's what we do in the medical device industry, is take complicated problems and reduce it down to actionable reports. So a lot of people are coming at this different angles, and we just decided to do it all at once and make it cost effective.
Now, I think there is this implied assumption out there that when it comes to COVID testing, it happens at the onset. What you're proposing is something that is ongoing throughout the infection and the recovery process. And why is that important?
Yeah, so the dynamics of this disease are that we know from coronavirus models that it goes through several phases. And so, the part that we're concerned about is that you have asymptomatic carriers. They're out there, they're fine, but they're actually spreading the virus. And that's because they just haven't triggered the immune response, or the immune response wasn't triggered by some comorbidity factor. So what we have to do is, once we know you have COVID-19, we then have to watch out to see if you're going to have a breakdown of your immune system, which is, people know from now the media, is called a cytokine storm. So we need to know you are infected, one. Two, where are you? Have you started the cytokine storm? Will you start a cytokine storm? And then once it's passed and we can treat it with the new drugs that are coming out, we have to make sure that you're convalescing. So I envision a test that screens and monitors until the doctors are convinced that you are now in an immune status. You're not a harm to yourself or to your loved ones or the people around you. And so this is not going to be a single-use test. You have to monitor people to convalescence if we're going to help everybody.
Okay, terrific. Now, my understanding is that you guys are either gearing up or in preclinical trials. Is that right?
We are writing clinical protocols right now. We're collecting samples around the world. It's our goal to have a FDA approved clinical trial. We'll submit this to the FDA for emergency use authorization. And our first test is got a turnaround day about 2 days. But because of the urgency, we need to get it out there fast. Then we'll follow it on the heels with a FDA-cleared one-day turnaround test, and we're hoping to launch it as soon as possible. The only things that are challenging right now is get the paperwork done, get the samples in, and then compete for funding. The faster we get our fundraising done, the faster we can bring the test on the market. So, it's an entrepreneur's dream to have these many challenges all at once, and we accept the challenge.
So if you had the megaphone and you had direct access, what are the types of organizations, agencies, or individuals that you will want to reach, and why?
Well, right now, with this test and given the emergency, we're in discussions with big lab service providers. We don't want to build sales and marketing channels. We don't want to have to spend years doing that. So we're in discussions right now with people that will just license our test to, and they are already in the marketplace of collecting samples to be tested at doctors' offices, at hospitals, at medical centers. We have to focus this on the patient. We got to make it as easy as possible. We got to get the report to the doctor as fast as possible. And we're going to do it with people that are already in the space. So with a little bit of luck, we'll have the right lab service partner that can get this test out there ASAP and work with us worldwide so we can deliver this very important product.
Terrific. Now, what would you say to those that perhaps maybe are thinking, by the time this comes out, it's readily available to physicians and hospitals. Would this pandemic be behind us? And also, there are mixed information that's coming out in terms of vaccine readiness, right? We've seen some failures. We're seeing some research or articles coming out of Oxford saying that they could be ready as early as this September, whereas others are saying we could be easily Q3, Q4 of next year, 2021. So based on that kind of tight window, what does it mean for you guys, and why is it important during but also after the pandemic for us to continue to focus on this?
I love this question, and I love this question because this is my last rodeo. And so what I'm going to do is I am building a test that will be for COVID-19. But as you know, I said we measure everything. This is a test for all future pandemics or epidemics, which are more local. We're building a test that should be used forever, and that we should be using this with surveillance, like World Health Organization, other organizations, that we have sentinel groups around the world, that you donate blood, we look at your blood, and if we see any RNA that's outside the normal range, we need to get busy preparing for what's coming. So vaccines or treatments, whatever comes to work the best for everybody, is why just build a COVID-19 test? If we can measure everything, we just built a test for every future epidemic and pandemic to come along. So that's what I'm building is, I'm not going to get into the game for COVID-19. This is going to be something that leads us to a healthier and stable world. That's what I'd like to leave behind. That's what our company would like to leave behind.
All right. So for listeners, as well as those that are very interested in this topic, how can they learn more?
Well, you can go to our website. It's fbbbio.com. You can go into my LinkedIn. You can send us messages. LinkedIn has been a good source for us to collect materials on. There are COVID-19 biobanks that are posting on social media. And you can find us. We're out on the internet, and we're yelling and screaming for help for every resource angle there is, because we think this is a world problem, and it's going to take world resources to solve it. And if you want to get in touch with us, get in touch with us through our website or send me a LinkedIn message, and we'll take it from there.
All right. Just a quick disclosure, FBB Biomedical is actually one of our portfolio startups. So today I've been joined by Dr. Howard Urnovitz, who is the CEO of FBB Biomedical. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you so much, Scott.